A billionaire walks into his own cafe completely disguised, but the shy waitress slips him a mysterious note that shocks him to his core and changes everything. What city are you in? Drop it below and subscribe. Here comes an emotional story with a finale you won't believe. The early morning fog rolled through downtown Seattle as Daniel Crawford adjusted the worn baseball cap lower over his eyes. At 34, he'd built an empire that included 15 high-end coffee shops across the Pacific Northwest. But today, he walked into his flagship location dressed like any other customer. Faded jeans, an old jacket, and sneakers that had seen better days. This wasn't about checking up on his employees. This was personal. Someone had been embezzling from this location for months, and Daniel needed to see the operation from the inside without anyone recognizing him. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped inside Crawford's cafe, and immediately the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee beans enveloped him. The morning rush hadn't started yet, leaving the space quiet except for the soft jazz playing overhead. Daniel had poured his heart into designing this place. Exposed brick walls, warm lighting, comfortable leather chairs, and seeing it through a customer's eyes reminded him why he'd started this business in the first place. "Good morning. Welcome to Crawford's," a soft voice called out from behind the counter. Daniel looked up and found himself staring at a young woman with gentle brown eyes and dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wore the standard cafe uniform, but something about her careful movements and the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear suggested a nervousness that intrigued him. Her name tag read, Nicole. "Morning," Daniel replied gruffly, keeping his voice lower than usual as he approached the counter. He'd done his research on all the employees here, and Nicole Martin wasn't on his list of suspects. 26 years old, she'd been working at the cafe for 8 months, always on time, never called in sick, and according to the manager's reports, she was quiet but efficient. Nicole smiled warmly, though he noticed her hands trembled slightly as she reached for an order pad. "What can I get for you today?" "Just black coffee. Large." Daniel studied her face as she wrote down his order. Up close, he could see the fatigue in her eyes, the kind that came from working too many hours or carrying too many worries. There was something fragile about her, like a bird with a broken wing, trying desperately to keep flying. "Coming right up." She moved to the espresso machine with practiced efficiency, and Daniel noticed how she glanced nervously toward the back office every few seconds. Was she involved in the embezzlement? His gut said no, but he'd learned long ago not to trust first impressions in business. As Nicole prepared his coffee, Daniel surveyed the cafe. 2 other employees worked the morning shift. Marcus, a college student who handled the register, and Diane, the assistant manager who was currently restocking pastries. Both were on his watch list, though Diane was his primary suspect. The numbers pointed to someone with management access, and Diane had been acting strangely for the past 2 months according to his surveillance reports. "Here you go, sir." Nicole's soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. She set the coffee on the counter with both hands, clearly trying to steady them. "That'll be $3.50. Daniel handed her a $5 bill and noticed how thin her wrists were, how her uniform hung slightly loose on her frame. "Keep the change." "Thank you." Her face lit up with genuine gratitude, and something twisted in Daniel's chest. When was the last time someone had been genuinely grateful for a $1.50 tip? In his world of high-stakes business deals and 7-figure transactions, he'd forgotten what it was like to struggle for every dollar. He took his coffee to a corner table with a clear view of the counter and the back office. For the next hour, he watched the morning routine unfold. Marcus handled the growing line of customers with easy charm. Diane barked orders from the back with an authority that bordered on aggressive, and Nicole moved through it all like a ghost, efficient but almost invisible. What caught Daniel's attention was the way Nicole's eyes kept darting to the back office, and how she flinched every time Diane's voice rose. This wasn't the behavior of a thief. This was the behavior of someone afraid. Around 8 o'clock, during a brief lull in customers, Daniel watched Nicole slip away from the counter and disappear into the back hallway. His instincts kicked in immediately. He waited 30 seconds, then followed, moving quietly through the employee-only door. The hallway was dim, lined with storage closets and the manager's office. Daniel heard soft voices, Nicole's trembling tone and Diane's sharp response, coming from the office. He positioned himself just out of sight, listening. "I'm telling you, something's wrong with the numbers," Nicole was saying, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been tracking the inventory against the daily receipts, and there's money missing. A lot of money." Daniel's pulse quickened. She knew about the embezzlement. "You need to stop looking at things that aren't your business," Diane snapped. "You're a waitress, Nicole, not an accountant. Focus on your tables and let me handle the management side." "But Mr. Crawford deserves to know." "Mr. Crawford is a billionaire who owns 15 cafes. You think he cares about a few $100s here and there? Stay in your lane, or you'll find yourself looking for a new job. And we both know you can't afford that, can we?" Silence. Then Nicole's soft footsteps approaching the door. Daniel quickly moved back toward the dining area, sliding into his corner seat just as Nicole emerged from the hallway. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, but she immediately put on a brave smile as a new customer entered the cafe. For the next 2 hours, Daniel watched Nicole work with renewed interest. She wasn't just efficient, she was observant. She noticed everything. How Marcus sometimes forgot to ring up extra shots of espresso. How Diane would disappear for 20-minute breaks that coincided with the busiest times, leaving Nicole and Marcus scrambling. How the pastry inventory never quite matched what was displayed in the case. This shy, trembling waitress was the only person in his entire cafe who'd noticed the theft. Around noon, as Daniel pretended to work on his laptop, Nicole approached his table with a fresh pot of coffee. "Would you like a refill, sir?" "Thanks." He pushed his cup forward, watching as her hands shook while pouring. She was terrified of something, and he had a growing suspicion it wasn't just Diane's threats. Nicole set down the pot and glanced around nervously. The cafe was bustling now, filled with the lunch crowd, and no one was paying attention to them. She pulled a small piece of paper from her apron pocket and placed it on his table next to his coffee cup, then quickly walked away before he could say anything. Daniel stared at the folded note for a long moment. What the hell? He glanced up to find Nicole at the counter, deliberately not looking in his direction. Slowly, he unfolded the paper and read the neat handwriting inside. "I know who you are, Mr. Crawford. Please don't fire me for saying this, but someone is stealing from you. Diane has been taking money from the register and falsifying the inventory reports. I have proof. I tried to tell you through the corporate hotline, but someone intercepted my call. I'm scared, but you deserve to know the truth. I work the closing shift tonight if you want to talk. Please help. Nicole." Daniel read the note 3 times, his mind racing. She'd recognized him despite the disguise. She'd tried to report the theft through official channels, and someone had intercepted that call, which meant Diane had help higher up in his organization. He looked up at Nicole, who was serving another customer, but kept glancing his way with terrified eyes. This woman had risked her job, possibly her safety, to warn him about the theft. She had no idea that he'd already suspected Diane, but she'd done the right thing anyway. Little did she know this moment would change both their lives forever. Daniel folded the note carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He stayed in the cafe for another hour, observing with new eyes. Diane's behavior was textbook embezzlement, defensive, controlling, and increasingly aggressive toward Nicole, who she clearly saw as a threat. When Diane stepped out for supplies at 2 o'clock, Daniel used the cafe's security app on his phone to watch the surveillance footage. Sure enough, Diane went straight to her car and sat there for 15 minutes on her phone, probably coordinating with whoever was helping her cover her tracks. As Daniel finally stood to leave, he caught Nicole's eye across the crowded cafe. She looked terrified and hopeful all at once. He gave her the smallest nod, just enough to let her know he'd gotten the message, and watched relief wash over her face. Outside, Daniel pulled out his phone and called his head of security. "I need a full background check on Nicole Martin, and I need it in 2 hours. Also, pull all the phone records for the corporate compliance hotline for the past 6 months. Someone's been intercepting calls, and I want to know who." As he walked to his car, Daniel couldn't shake the image of Nicole's trembling hands and brave eyes. She reminded him of someone from a long time ago, someone who'd also tried to do the right thing and paid a terrible price for it. His younger sister, Emma, had been just as soft-spoken and gentle before she'd tried to expose corruption in her workplace and been crushed by people with more power and fewer scruples. Emma had taken her own life 3 years ago, unable to cope with the retaliation and isolation that followed her whistleblowing. Daniel had been too busy building his empire to notice how much she was struggling until it was too late. He'd sworn then that he'd never let someone brave enough to stand up for what's right suffer alone again. Nicole didn't know it yet, but she just gained a very powerful ally, and Daniel Crawford didn't lose battles he cared about winning. He slid into his Mercedes, tossed the baseball cap onto the passenger seat, and pulled up the cafe's schedule on his phone. Nicole's closing shift ended at 9 o'clock tonight. That gave him 7 hours to prepare. This time, he wouldn't let the brave one fall. And before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave your city in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe for more. Now, let's see what happens next. Nicole's hands were still shaking at 8:45 that evening as she wiped down the last table. The cafe was finally empty, the chairs stacked, the floors swept. Marcus had left an hour ago, and Diane had disappeared around 7 without a word, leaving Nicole to close alone. Again. She didn't mind the solitude, but tonight her nerves were stretched to their breaking point. He'd gotten her note. Mr. Crawford had nodded at her, which meant he understood, which meant he was coming back. Or maybe it meant he was furious, and she'd be fired the moment he walked through that door. Nicole's stomach churned as she hung up her apron in the back room. She'd spent the entire afternoon replaying their brief interaction, trying to read meaning into that single nod. Why had she been so reckless? She should have kept her head down, focused on keeping her job, stayed invisible like she'd learned to do so well. But when she'd recognized Daniel Crawford beneath that baseball cap, those distinctive grey eyes that had been on the cover of Forbes last month were impossible to miss. Something inside her had cracked. He deserved to know what was happening in his own business. He deserved the truth, even if the truth cost her everything. The back door chimed, and Nicole's heart leaped into her throat. She grabbed her purse and hurried to the front, expecting to see the night security guard making his rounds. Instead, Daniel Crawford stood just inside the entrance, no longer in disguise. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Nicole made in 3 months. His dark hair styled perfectly, every inch the billionaire CEO she'd read about online. "Mr. Crawford," Nicole's voice came out as a whisper. "I'm so sorry if I overstepped." "You didn't." He moved toward her with confident strides, and Nicole instinctively took a step back. She wasn't afraid of him exactly, but his presence filled the entire room in a way that made her feel incredibly small. "I need to see your proof. Everything you have on Diane." Relief flooded through Nicole so intensely, her knees nearly buckled. "You believe me? I already suspected her." Daniel stopped a few feet away, maintaining a professional distance that Nicole appreciated. "But I need evidence that will hold up legally. Can you show me?" Nicole nodded quickly and hurried to the back office. Her hands fumbled with the key to the filing cabinet. Technically, she wasn't supposed to have this key, but the previous manager had made copies for all the senior staff before he'd been suddenly let go 2 months ago. She pulled out a folder stuffed with photocopied receipts, handwritten notes, and printed spreadsheets. "I've been tracking the discrepancies for 6 weeks," Nicole explained as she spread the documents across the desk. Daniel moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, and her pulse quickened for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "The inventory reports Diane submits to corporate don't match the actual stock. She's been skimming cash from the register during busy periods when it's harder to track individual transactions. And look here." Nicole pointed to a series of receipts. "These are supply orders that were supposedly paid for, but the suppliers never delivered. The money went somewhere else." Daniel leaned over the desk, studying the documents with an intensity that made Nicole's skin prickle with awareness. This close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the strong line of his jaw, the way his brow furrowed in concentration. He was devastatingly handsome in person, nothing like the cold, distant figure she'd imagined billionaires to be. "This is thorough," Daniel said quietly, almost to himself. He looked up at Nicole, and the approval in his eyes made something warm unfurl in her chest. "How did you put all this together?" "I'm good with numbers." Nicole tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she couldn't break. "I was studying accounting at community college before I had to drop out. I noticed the patterns didn't add up, so I started keeping my own records." "Why did you drop out?" The question was casual, but Nicole heard the genuine curiosity beneath it. She hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. "My dad got sick, lung cancer. I needed to work full-time to help with his medical bills and take care of him. He passed away 4 months ago." Something shifted in Daniel's expression, a flicker of pain that made him seem suddenly human rather than untouchable. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Nicole blinked back the tears that always threatened when she talked about her father. "He was a good man. He taught me that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. That's why I couldn't stay quiet about this. Even though speaking up could cost you your job?" Daniel's voice had gentled, lost some of its corporate edge. "Even then." Nicole met his gaze directly for the first time, and was startled by the intensity she found there. "You built something special here, Mr. Crawford. This cafe gave me a job when I desperately needed one. It gave my dad a place to sit and read his paper on the mornings when he felt well enough to leave the house. You deserve to know when someone's destroying what you've created." Daniel stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across his face. Then he straightened and pulled out his phone. "I'm going to have my legal team come document all of this. They'll need your statement as well. Are you willing to testify if this goes to court?" Fear shot through Nicole's chest. Court meant lawyers, meant publicity, meant standing up in front of people and being questioned and possibly destroyed by whoever Diane had helping her. But she'd come this far. "Yes, I'll testify." "Good." Daniel made a quick call, speaking in clipped tones to someone named Richard about evidence collection and legal proceedings. When he hung up, he turned back to Nicole with an expression that was almost soft. "They'll be here in 20 minutes. In the meantime, I need you to tell me exactly what happened when you called the corporate compliance hotline." Nicole recounted the story. How she'd called from her cell phone during her lunch break 3 weeks ago, how she'd been transferred to someone who claimed to be from the compliance department, how that person had asked detailed questions about her concerns and promised to investigate, and how nothing had happened afterward except Diane had become increasingly hostile toward her. "The person you spoke to wasn't from compliance," Daniel said grimly. "Someone intercepted that call and warned Diane, which means she has help inside my corporate structure." The implications of that statement settled over Nicole like a cold blanket. She'll come after me when she finds out I talked to you. She won't get the chance." Daniel's voice was hard as steel. "As of tonight, Diane is suspended pending investigation. You'll be working directly with me until we sort this out." Nicole's eyes widened. "Working with you? But I'm just a waitress. You're the only person in this entire organization who had the integrity and intelligence to notice what was happening and do something about it." Daniel's grey eyes locked onto hers. "I don't know what Diane's been telling you, but you're not just anything, Nicole. You're exactly the kind of person I need working for me." The compliment hit Nicole like a physical force. When was the last time someone had seen value in her beyond her ability to serve coffee and clean tables? When had anyone looked at her like she mattered? "I don't understand," Nicole whispered. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Daniel's expression darkened, and for a moment Nicole thought she'd said something wrong. Then he spoke, his voice rough with old pain. 3 years ago, my sister tried to expose corruption at the law firm where she worked. She did everything right. Gathered evidence, reported it properly, trusted the system to protect her. Instead, they destroyed her reputation, isolated her, made her life so unbearable that she... He stopped, jaw clenched. She took her own life because the people in power chose to protect themselves rather than do what was right. Nicole's breath caught. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't there for her when she needed me most. I was too focused on building my business empire to notice she was drowning." Daniel's eyes met Nicole's, blazing with intensity. "I swore I'd never let that happen again. You did the brave thing, the right thing. I won't let you suffer for it." The vulnerability in his confession made Nicole's chest ache. This powerful, intimidating billionaire was still haunted by his sister's death, still carrying guilt that wasn't his to bear. Without thinking, Nicole reached out and touched his arm gently. "Your sister would be proud that you're honoring her memory this way." Daniel looked down at her hand on his arm, and Nicole suddenly realized how inappropriate the gesture was. She started to pull away, but his hand covered hers, holding it in place. His skin was warm, his grip firm but careful, and Nicole's breath stuttered at the contact. "Thank you," Daniel said softly, "for what you did, for taking the risk, for giving me a chance to make this right." They stood like that for several heartbeats, hands touching, eyes locked, and Nicole felt something shift between them, something that had nothing to do with corporate theft and everything to do with the recognition of kindred souls. Two people who'd lost someone they loved. Two people trying to do the right thing in a world that often punished integrity. The moment was shattered by the sound of cars pulling up outside. Daniel released her hand and stepped back, his professional mask sliding into place so smoothly, Nicole almost wondered if she'd imagined the connection. But his eyes still held warmth when he looked at her, and that gave her courage. "That'll be my legal team," Daniel said. "This is going to be a long night. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Nicole squared her shoulders and nodded. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt like she was doing something that mattered. "I'm ready." What she wasn't ready for was how dramatically her life was about to change, or how the man standing beside her would become the center of her entire world. 2 weeks later, Nicole stood in an office on the 42nd floor of Crawford Tower, staring out at the Seattle skyline and wondering how her life had turned into something unrecognizable. The legal proceedings had moved with startling speed once Daniel's team got involved. Diane had been arrested, along with 2 executives in the corporate compliance department who'd been helping her cover her tracks. The investigation had uncovered embezzlement totaling nearly $200,000 across multiple café locations. And Nicole, the shy waitress who just wanted to do the right thing, had somehow become Daniel Crawford's personal assistant. The meeting with the board starts in 5 minutes. Daniel's voice came from behind her, and Nicole turned to find him adjusting his tie in the reflection of the window. Even after 2 weeks of working closely with him, the sight of Daniel Crawford in a perfectly tailored suit still made her pulse quicken in ways that were absolutely inappropriate for an employee. "I have the quarterly reports ready," Nicole said, holding up the tablet she'd been clutching like a lifeline. She'd spent the past 2 weeks learning more about business operations than she'd learned in 2 years of community college. Daniel had thrown her into the deep end, trusting her to handle tasks that should have gone to someone with an MBA, and somehow she'd managed not to drown. "You're going to do great." Daniel crossed the office to stand beside her, and Nicole caught the now familiar scent of his cologne. "The board can be intimidating, but remember, you know these numbers better than anyone. Just present the facts." "Facts I can do." Nicole tried to smile, but her stomach was a knot of anxiety. "It's the part where 12 powerful executives stare at me like I don't belong that I'm worried about." "You belong." Daniel's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and reassuring. "You've earned your place here, Nicole. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." The touch lingered a moment too long, and when Nicole looked up, she found Daniel's grey eyes locked on her face with an intensity that made breathing difficult. This had been happening more frequently over the past few days. Moments where the professional boundary between them seemed to blur, where Nicole could swear she saw something more than employer appreciation in his gaze. But that was ridiculous. Men like Daniel Crawford didn't look at women like Nicole Martin with anything other than professional courtesy. She was his assistant, nothing more, and she needed to remember that before she did something humiliating, like develop actual feelings for her boss. Daniel's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He stepped back, and Nicole immediately missed his warmth. "That's Richard, time to face the board." The conference room was exactly as intimidating as Nicole had feared. 12 executives in expensive suits sat around a massive table, most of them looking at her with expressions ranging from curious to openly skeptical. Nicole recognized several faces from her research. Elizabeth Chen, the CFO who'd been with Daniel since he started the company. Marcus Walsh, the head of operations who'd publicly opposed Daniel's aggressive expansion strategy. And Robert Crawford, Daniel's father, who sat at the far end of the table with the bearing of a man who'd built his own empire before his son had built a bigger one. "Gentlemen, Elizabeth," Daniel began, gesturing to Nicole as she set up the presentation. "This is Nicole Martin, my new executive assistant. She'll be presenting the quarterly analysis for our café division." "Is this the waitress who exposed the embezzlement?" Robert Crawford's deep voice cut through the room. His eyes, the same grey as Daniel's, assessed Nicole with the sharpness of a man who'd spent his life evaluating people for weakness. "Interesting choice for an executive role, son." Nicole's cheeks burned, but before she could respond, Daniel's voice turned cold. "Nicole has demonstrated more business acumen in 2 weeks than some executives show in years. I suggest you judge her on her presentation, not her previous job title." The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Nicole had learned that Daniel and his father had a complicated relationship. Robert had wanted Daniel to join the family real estate business, while Daniel had insisted on building his own company. The cafe chain's success had proven Daniel right, but that hadn't smoothed over old resentments. "Let's see what she's got," Elizabeth said diplomatically, giving Nicole an encouraging nod. Nicole took a deep breath and began. She presented the quarterly numbers, highlighting the revenue increases in 8 locations and flagging concerns in 3 others. She explained the patterns she'd noticed in customer behavior, the impact of seasonal menu changes, and her recommendations for improving efficiency. As she spoke, her nervousness faded, replaced by the confidence that came from truly understanding her material. She was good at this. She'd always been good with numbers and patterns, and having Daniel's trust had given her the courage to trust herself. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then Elizabeth started clapping, and several other board members joined in. "That was impressive," Marcus Walsh admitted grudgingly. "Your analysis of the downtown location's foot traffic patterns could revolutionize how we handle staffing." "Thank you, Mr. Walsh." Nicole allowed herself a small smile. "Where did you study business?" Elizabeth asked. "I didn't finish my degree." Nicole forced herself to meet the CFO's gaze. "I completed 2 years at Seattle Community College before family circumstances required me to leave. Everything else I've learned on the job." 2 years of community college, and you're presenting to this board? Robert Crawford's eyebrows rose. "Daniel, I'm starting to think you have a talent for finding diamonds in unusual places." It wasn't quite an apology, but coming from Robert Crawford, it was close. Nicole saw Daniel's shoulders relax slightly. The rest of the meeting proceeded smoothly, and when it finally ended, Nicole felt like she'd run a marathon. She gathered her materials with shaking hands while the board members filed out, several of them stopping to compliment her work. Elizabeth was the last to leave, pausing to touch Nicole's arm. "You're a natural," the CFO said quietly. "Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. And if you ever need someone to talk to about navigating corporate politics, my door's always open." "Thank you," Nicole said gratefully. "That means a lot." When they were finally alone, Daniel leaned against the conference table and grinned. "You killed it." "I was terrified." Nicole's legs felt wobbly now that the adrenaline was fading. "Your father hates me." "My father respects competence above all else, and you just demonstrated that in spades." Daniel's expression softened. "I'm proud of you, Nicole. You've worked incredibly hard these past 2 weeks." The praise made Nicole's heart do something complicated in her chest. She'd been working 12-hour days, learning everything she could about Daniel's business, desperate to prove she deserved this opportunity. Hearing that he'd noticed, that he was proud, meant more than she could express. "I don't want to let you down," Nicole said quietly. "You took a huge risk promoting me like this. People are watching to see if I fail. Then let them watch while you succeed." Daniel pushed away from the table and moved toward her, and Nicole's breath caught. "You're not going to fail, Nicole. You're too smart, too determined, and too brave to fail." "Knees." He was standing close again, close enough that Nicole had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. She should step away, should put professional distance between them, but her feet refused to cooperate. "Why do you believe in me so much?" The question escaped before Nicole could stop it. "You barely know me." "I know enough." Daniel's hand rose as if to touch her face, then dropped. "I know you're willing to risk everything to do what's right. I know you're brilliant with numbers and patterns. I know you work harder than anyone else in this building, and I know—" He stopped, something conflicted flickering across his face. "Know what?" Nicole whispered. "I know I shouldn't be standing this close to my assistant." Daniel's voice had gone rough. "I know I shouldn't be thinking about you when I should be focused on work. I know this is completely inappropriate, and I should walk away right now." Nicole's heart hammered so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "Are you going to walk away?" For a long moment, Daniel just stared at her, and Nicole saw the internal war playing out in his expression. Then he took a deliberate step back, and disappointment crashed through her chest. "Yes," Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Because you deserve better than being involved with your boss. You deserve someone who can offer you a relationship without the complications of power dynamics and office politics." "What if I don't want someone else?" The words tumbled out before Nicole could consider the wisdom of saying them. "What if I want—" She stopped, mortified. What was she doing? Daniel Crawford was a billionaire, her boss, and completely out of her league. Whatever she thought she'd seen in his eyes, whatever spark she'd felt between them, was probably just wishful thinking on her part. "I'm sorry," Nicole said quickly, grabbing her tablet. "That was inappropriate. I should go." Daniel's hand caught her wrist gently, stopping her. "Don't apologize, and don't run." His thumb brushed across her pulse point, and Nicole's entire body came alive at the touch. "I need you to understand something. This," he gestured between them, "this isn't one-sided. I've been fighting this since the moment I read your note in the café, but I'm your employer, Nicole. There's an imbalance of power that makes any relationship between us potentially problematic." "So what do we do?" Nicole asked, her voice barely audible. "We do our jobs." Daniel released her wrist, though he looked pained to do it. "We maintain professional boundaries, and we see where life takes us when those boundaries don't apply anymore." It wasn't a rejection, but it wasn't a promise either. Nicole nodded, understanding the wisdom even as her heart protested. "Okay, professional boundaries, I can do that." "So can I," Daniel said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Starting right now. We have a site visit to the Portland location this afternoon. Are you ready?" Nicole straightened her shoulders, pushing down the tumult of emotions swirling through her chest. "I'm ready." "Would be..." But as she followed Daniel out of the conference room, she couldn't shake the feeling that professional boundaries were going to be much harder to maintain than either of them anticipated, especially when every fiber of her being wanted to cross those boundaries and see what lay on the other side. The Portland trip changed everything. They'd taken Daniel's private plane, Nicole's first time flying private, which had been overwhelming in itself, and spent 2 days touring the cafe location, meeting with staff and analyzing operations. Professional, appropriate, exactly what they'd agreed to, except Daniel kept finding excuses to touch her. A hand on her lower back, guiding her through doorways, fingers brushing hers when passing documents, standing close enough that she could feel his body heat. And Nicole was certain she wasn't imagining the way his eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. On the second night, they'd had dinner at a small Italian restaurant near their hotel. Daniel had insisted it was a working dinner, but the intimate corner booth and candlelight suggested otherwise. They'd talked for hours. About business, yes, but also about books and music and dreams they'd had before life got complicated. Nicole learned that Daniel had wanted to be an architect before his sister's death had made him realize how fragile happiness could be. He'd built his cafe empire not just for profit, but as a way to create spaces where people could feel safe and comfortable, small refuges from the harsh world outside. "I want every Crawford's cafe to feel like a sanctuary," Daniel had said, his eyes distant. "Emma used to say the world needed more kindness, more places where people could just breathe. I'm trying to build that legacy for her." Nicole's heart had ached at the vulnerability in his voice. Without thinking, she'd reached across the table and taken his hand. "She'd be so proud of you." Daniel had stared at their joined hands, then lifted his eyes to meet hers. The raw emotion in his gaze had stolen Nicole's breath. "You make me want to be the man she believed I could be." They'd held hands across that table for the rest of dinner, neither acknowledging it, neither pulling away. And when they'd returned to the hotel, Daniel had walked Nicole to her room, stood too close, looked at her lips like he was starving, and then whispered, "Good night," before walking away. Nicole had barely slept that night, her body humming with unfulfilled desire and her mind racing with possibilities she knew she shouldn't entertain. Now, a week after Portland, Nicole sat in Daniel's office reviewing expansion proposals while Daniel was on a call with investors. She'd been trying to focus on the numbers for the past 20 minutes, but her attention kept drifting to Daniel, the way his voice took on a commanding tone during business discussions, The way he ran his hand through his hair when he was thinking. The way he looked at her every few minutes as if making sure she was still there. This was becoming impossible. The office door burst open, and Robert Crawford strode in without knocking. Daniel held up a finger, wrapping up his call quickly, and Nicole started to gather her things to give them privacy. "Stay," Robert said, surprising her. "This concerns you too." Nicole sank back into her chair as Daniel ended his call and stood. "Dad, I thought we were meeting tomorrow." Plans changed. Robert's expression was grim. "I just came from lunch with Gerald Morrison from the Seattle Business Council. Apparently, there are rumors circulating about you and your assistant." Nicole's stomach dropped. Daniel's face went carefully blank. "What kind of rumors?" "The kind that suggest your relationship is more than professional." Robert's gaze moved between them. "Gerald asked if I was concerned about potential lawsuits. Given that you promoted a waitress to an executive position shortly after she became involved with you, romantically." "That's not what happened," Nicole said quickly, her face burning. "Mr. Crawford promoted me because of my work on the embezzlement case, not because of any romantic relationship. There is no romantic relationship." "Nicole's right," Daniel said, his voice tight. "These rumors are completely unfounded." Robert studied them both with those sharp grey eyes. "Are they? Because from where I'm standing, I see two people who can barely keep their eyes off each other. I also see a brilliant young woman whose career could be destroyed by association with my son, and my son making the same damn mistake I made 30 years ago." "What mistake?" Daniel's voice had gone cold. "Falling for someone who works for you." Robert's expression softened slightly. "Your mother was my secretary when we met. I thought I was being noble, keeping our relationship quiet until she could transition to a different role. Instead, the rumors destroyed her reputation, and she spent years being dismissed as the woman who slept her way into my bed and my bank account." Nicole had known that Daniel's mother had worked for his father, but she'd never heard this version of the story. She looked at Daniel and saw pain flash across his face. "Mom never told me that," Daniel said quietly, "because she didn't want you to carry the same guilt I've carried for decades." Robert moved closer to his son. "But I'm telling you now, if you care about Nicole, and it's obvious you do, you need to either make your relationship official and deal with the consequences head-on, or you need to put real distance between you. This middle ground will destroy her career and your reputation." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Nicole felt sick. She'd been so caught up in the growing connection with Daniel that she hadn't considered how it looked from the outside. Of course, people were talking. The waitress who got promoted to executive assistant right after exposing embezzlement. It looked suspicious at best, scandalous at worst. "Nicole hasn't done anything wrong," Daniel said firmly. "Her promotion was based entirely on merit. I know that, and you know that, but the court of public opinion doesn't care about facts." Robert's voice gentled. "I like Nicole. She's smart, brave, and exactly the kind of person your company needs. But if you two continue this dance without being honest about what's happening, you'll both lose." Robert left without waiting for a response, closing the door quietly behind him. Nicole stared at her hands, her mind reeling. Daniel was silent for a long moment, then crossed to where she sat and knelt beside her chair. "Look at me," he said softly. Nicole raised her eyes to his, and the tenderness she found there made her throat tight. "My father's right," Daniel said. "We've been lying to ourselves, pretending we can maintain professional boundaries when we both know we crossed them weeks ago. Every time I touch you, every time we share those moments, we're dancing closer to something we've been pretending doesn't exist." "What are you saying?" Nicole's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm saying I care about you, more than I should, more than is appropriate for an employer." Daniel's hand covered hers. "I'm saying I think about you constantly. I'm saying I haven't felt this alive since before Emma died, and it terrifies me. I'm terrified too, Nicole admitted. You're my boss. You're a billionaire. You could have anyone, and I'm just... Don't finish that sentence. Daniel's voice was fierce. You're not just anything, Nicole. You're extraordinary. You're brave and brilliant and kind. You make me want to be better. You make me feel like myself again, instead of the empty shell I've been since I lost my sister. Tears spilled down Nicole's cheeks. I don't know how to do this. I dated in college, but nothing serious. And you're human, Daniel finished. Just a man who's falling for an incredible woman and doesn't know how to make this work without hurting her. So what do we do? Nicole asked, echoing the question she'd asked weeks ago. Daniel stood and pulled her to her feet, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. We figure it out together. But first, I need to know, is this what you want? Not the job, not the opportunities I can provide. Do you want me? Because if you do, I'm going to kiss you right now, and there won't be any going back from that. Nicole's heart pounded so hard, she thought it might break free. She should say no. She should be sensible and cautious and protect her career. But when she looked into Daniel's eyes and saw the same longing, the same fear, the same hope that was coursing through her own veins, she couldn't lie. I want you, Nicole whispered. I've wanted you since that first day in the café, and I'm tired of pretending I don't. Daniel's smile was brilliant and brief before his mouth claimed hers. The kiss was everything Nicole had imagined, and nothing she could have prepared for. Gentle and fierce, tender and desperate, a conversation conducted without words. His hands slid into her hair while hers gripped his shirt, pulling him closer. She felt cherished and desired all at once, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nicole knew nothing would ever be the same. That was worth waiting for, Daniel said roughly, his forehead resting against hers. What happens now? Nicole's hands were shaking again, but this time with exhilaration rather than fear. Now we do what my father suggested. We're honest about this relationship. Daniel's thumb traced her cheek. I'll talk to the board tomorrow, make sure everyone understands that our relationship started after your promotion, not before. You'll have the option to work with Elizabeth instead, if you want to avoid any appearance of impropriety. I don't want to work with Elizabeth, Nicole said quickly. I want to work with you. Then we'll figure out how to make that work ethically. There will be gossip, and some people won't believe the timeline, but we'll face it together. Daniel kissed her again, softer this time. If that's what you want. It's what I want, Nicole confirmed, but I'm still terrified. So am I, Daniel admitted, but I've learned that the things worth having are usually the ones that scare us most. They stood like that for a while, holding each other, and Nicole marveled at how quickly her life had transformed. 2 months ago, she'd been a grieving waitress struggling to pay her father's medical bills. Now she was standing in a billionaire's arms, having just been kissed senseless, about to navigate the complicated world of a high-profile relationship. But when Daniel looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world, Nicole knew every challenge would be worth it. She'd been brave enough to slip him that note in the café. She could be brave enough for this too. The announcement of their relationship to the board went better than expected. Elizabeth had been supportive, Robert had been pragmatic, and while Marcus Walsh had raised concerns about optics, even he'd admitted that Daniel's transparency was the right approach. They'd restructured Nicole's position, so she reported to Elizabeth for daily operations, but still worked closely with Daniel on strategic projects. It wasn't perfect, but it was ethical. The public response was another matter entirely. Billionaire CEO's Cinderella story, romance or exploitation. Read one headline. From waitress to executive, how Nicole Martin really got her promotion, screamed another. Social media had exploded with opinions, most of them assuming the worst. Nicole had gone from anonymous to infamous overnight, her face plastered across business blogs and gossip sites, her past dissected by strangers who knew nothing about her. 3 weeks after going public, Nicole stood in Daniel's penthouse apartment overlooking Elliott Bay, trying not to cry as she scrolled through the latest attacks on her character. Daniel's PR team had advised her to stay off social media, but she couldn't help looking. The cruelty was breathtaking. Gold digger. Social climber, sleeping her way to the top. The comments went on and on, each one cutting deeper than the last. You're supposed to be avoiding those. Daniel's voice came from behind her, gentle but concerned. He'd been in back-to-back meetings all day dealing with the fallout, and Nicole knew the negative attention was affecting his business relationships too. I know. Nicole set down her phone and turned to face him. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, jacket discarded, shadows under his eyes. I'm sorry, I can't seem to stop reading them. None of it is true. Daniel pulled her into his arms, and Nicole let herself lean against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. The people who matter know the truth. Do they? Nicole's voice cracked. I heard Elizabeth's assistant making jokes about me in the break room yesterday. Someone left a sticky note on my desk that said, "How much does a billionaire's girlfriend make per hour? Even people inside the company think I'm with you for your money." Daniel's arms tightened around her. I'll find out who's harassing you and fire them. You can't fire everyone who has an opinion. Nicole pulled back to look at him. That's the problem, Daniel. This isn't going away. Every time we're photographed together, every time you defend me, it just fuels more speculation. Maybe your father was right. Maybe we should have waited longer, been more careful. My father told us to be honest, and that's what we're doing. Daniel's jaw was set in that stubborn line Nicole had come to recognize. I won't hide our relationship like it's something shameful. But it's hurting you, Nicole said desperately. I saw the article in Forbes. Your competitors are using our relationship to question your judgment. You're losing potential investors because they think you're distracted or making emotional decisions rather than strategic ones. Let them think what they want. Daniel's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're worth more to me than any investment deal. But am I worth your company's reputation, your father's respect, your sister's legacy? Nicole felt tears spilling over. I'm not strong enough for this, Daniel. Every day I wake up and see another article tearing me apart, questioning whether I'm good enough, smart enough, worthy enough. And the worst part is, I'm starting to believe them. Nicole, maybe they're right. The words tumbled out in a rush. Maybe I'm not cut out for this world. I don't have the education, the background, the social skills. I make mistakes in meetings because I don't know the unwritten rules. I wear the wrong clothes to events because I can't afford designer outfits, and I don't know which fork to use at fancy dinners. I'm drowning, and I'm dragging you down with me. Stop! Daniel's voice was firm. You're not drowning, you're learning, and you're doing it while being attacked by people who are threatened by your success. That takes incredible strength, not weakness. I don't feel strong. Nicole's voice broke completely. I feel like that scared waitress again, pretending to be someone she's not. Daniel was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was raw. When Emma died, I spent months feeling exactly the way you do now. I questioned everything, whether I was strong enough to keep going, whether my success meant anything, whether I deserved to be happy when she never would be again. I built this company as a way to outrun that grief, to prove to myself that I was worth something, but it was all hollow. I was still empty inside. He pulled Nicole closer, his forehead resting against hers. Then you walked into my life with your trembling hands and brave eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than guilt and emptiness. You make me want to be better, Nicole. Not for the company, not for my father's approval, but because you deserve a man who's whole. You didn't drag me down. You pulled me up from a darkness I didn't even realize I was still in. I don't know if I'm strong enough to be what you need, Nicole whispered. You already are. Daniel kissed her softly. But I'm starting to realize that I haven't been what you need. I've been so focused on defending you publicly that I haven't asked what you actually want. So I'm asking now, what do you need from me? Nicole closed her eyes, feeling the truth settle into her bones. I need time, not away from you, she added quickly as Daniel stiffened, but time to prove, to myself more than anyone else, that I earned this position. Time to build credibility that isn't overshadowed by our relationship. Time to become the person everyone assumes I'm pretending to be. What are you suggesting? Daniel's voice was carefully neutral. I think I should move out of the executive assistant role. Work with Elizabeth on operations until I have more experience and education under my belt. Enroll in night classes to finish my business degree, build my career on my own merit, so that when people look at me, they see what I've accomplished, not who I'm dating. Daniel pulled back, pain flickering across his face. That could take years. I know. Nicole's heart was breaking, but she forced herself to continue. And I think during that time, we need to keep our relationship private. No public appearances together, no photographs. Let the scandal die down. Let me prove myself separately from you. You want us to hide? Daniel's voice had gone flat. I want us to survive. Nicole reached for his hand. Because right now, Daniel, I'm suffocating under the weight of public opinion, and it's affecting how I feel about myself and about us. When we're alone like this, everything is perfect. But the moment we step outside, I feel everyone's eyes judging me and I can't breathe. Daniel was silent for a long time, his jaw working. Then he pulled his hand away from hers and turned to stare out at the city lights. My father hid his relationship with my mother, and it destroyed her. I swore I'd never do that to someone I loved. The word loved hung in the air between them, acknowledged for the first time. Nicole's chest ached. I'm not asking you to be ashamed of me. I'm asking you to let me find my footing before I have to fight the whole world. There's a difference. Is there? Daniel's voice was bitter. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're letting them win. You're letting cruel strangers dictate our relationship. They're not just strangers. Nicole's voice rose. They're your investors, your business partners, your employees. They're people whose opinions affect your company and my career. And right now, those opinions are destroying both. So your solution is to walk away. It wasn't a question. I'm not walking away from you. I'm walking away from a situation that's making us both miserable. Nicole moved to stand beside him at the window. I love you, Daniel. That's why I'm saying this. Because I can see how this is affecting you. The stress, the lost deals, the way you're constantly defending me instead of focusing on your work. This isn't healthy for either of us. Daniel turned to face her, and the devastation in his eyes nearly broke Nicole's resolve. When Emma was struggling, I told myself I was too busy to really listen to what she needed. I convinced myself that my way of helping, throwing money at her problems, offering career advice, was enough. And then she was gone, and I realized I'd never actually heard what she was trying to tell me. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Nicole's ear, the gesture achingly tender. I hear you now. If you need space to build your career separately, if you need time to find your confidence, then I won't stand in your way. But I need you to understand something. I'm not hiding our relationship. I'll give you the privacy you need, but I won't lie if someone asks me directly, and I'm not giving up on us. I'm not asking you to give up, Nicole said through her tears. I just need to know that when we're together, it's because we choose each other, not because I'm clinging to you for security or status. You've never clung to anything. Daniel's thumb brushed away her tears. You're the strongest person I know, even if you can't see it right now. Nicole pressed her face against his chest, letting herself cry while Daniel held her. They stood like that for a long time, both grieving the relationship they'd barely had a chance to build before the world tore it apart. "I should go," Nicole finally said, though the words cost her everything. "I'll start the transition with Elizabeth tomorrow." "Oh, stay tonight." Daniel's arms tightened around her. "Just one more night where it's just us, no outside world, no judgment. Please." Nicole knew she should refuse, should make a clean break. But she was weak when it came to Daniel Crawford, and the pleading in his voice undid her. "Okay, one more night." They spent that night talking until dawn, sharing memories and dreams and fears. Daniel told her about Emma's love of architecture and how she'd always encouraged his creativity. Nicole told him about her father's quiet strength and how he taught her that integrity mattered more than success. They mapped out Nicole's career plan, Daniel offering advice on which classes to take and which skills to develop. They made love slowly, tenderly, like they were trying to memorize each other's bodies for the long separation ahead. And when Nicole finally left Daniel's penthouse at sunrise, she didn't know whether she'd made the bravest or most foolish decision of her life. What she did know was that she had to find herself before she could fully give herself to someone else. Even someone as extraordinary as Daniel Crawford. She just hoped they'd both survive the wait. 18 months later, Nicole stood in the same Crawford's café where her story with Daniel had begun. But everything was different now. She wore a tailored business suit that she'd bought with her own money earned as the newly promoted Director of Operations for Crawford's Café division. Her business degree sat framed in her new office 3 floors below Daniel's, earned through 2 semesters of night classes and countless hours of studying. Her hair was styled professionally, her posture confident, her hands steady as she reviewed the quarterly reports on her tablet. The 18 months apart had been the hardest of Nicole's life. She and Daniel had maintained strict professional boundaries, communicating only about work matters, never allowing themselves the intimacy they both craved. Nicole had thrown herself into proving her worth, acing her classes, exceeding every performance metric Elizabeth set for her, volunteering for the most challenging projects. Slowly, painfully, the gossip had died down. People started talking about Nicole's strategic insights rather than her relationship with the CEO. She'd earned respect through competence, exactly as she'd hoped. But God, she'd missed Daniel. Missed his touch, his laugh, the way he looked at her like she was the answer to questions he'd been asking his whole life. They'd passed each other in hallways, sat in the same meetings, exchanged polite professional greetings that felt like torture. Nicole had watched from a distance as Daniel threw himself into expanding the business, opening 10 new locations, launching a successful coffee bean line that was now sold in grocery stores nationwide. He'd been photographed at charity galas and business functions, always alone, and Nicole had studied those photos like she was starving, looking for signs that he was as miserable without her as she was without him. 3 weeks ago, Nicole had received her final grade, an A in Advanced Strategic Management, completing her degree with a perfect 4.0 GPA. She'd sat alone in her apartment with the notification on her screen and finally allowed herself to cry, releasing 18 months of loneliness and determination and hope that this sacrifice would be worth it. Today was the day she'd find out if it had been. "Nicole?" Elizabeth's voice pulled her from her thoughts. The CFO approached with a warm smile and a knowing look. "He's waiting for you in the original location. Good luck." Nicole's heart hammered. "Thank you for everything." "You did the work," Elizabeth said. "I just gave you the space to do it. Now, go get your man back." Nicole walked to the back corner booth, Daniel's favorite spot, where he'd sat 18 months ago in disguise, drinking black coffee and watching her work. He sat there now, no longer hiding, wearing the same faded jeans and baseball cap from that first day. The sight of him made Nicole's breath catch. Daniel looked up as she approached, and the longing in his grey eyes nearly undid her. "Hi," Hi. Nicole slid into the booth across from him, maintaining the physical distance even though everything in her screamed to touch him. You wanted to see me? I wanted to see you every day for the past 18 months, Daniel said quietly. But I respected your wishes. You asked for time and space to build your career, and I gave you that. But Nicole, I need to know, was it enough? Because I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending you're just another employee when you're so much more. Nicole's carefully prepared speech evaporated. I got my degree, graduated with honors. My promotion to Director of Operations was approved by the board unanimously, based solely on my performance metrics and strategic contributions. I've built credibility that's independent of our relationship. I know. I've watched you build something extraordinary. Daniel's hands clenched on the table, like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. I'm so damn proud of you, but that's not what I asked. I asked if it was enough. Have you proven whatever you needed to prove to yourself and the world? Because I've been waiting 18 months to tell you that I love you, and I don't want to wait any more. Tears burned Nicole's eyes. You've been waiting. Did you think I'd move on? Daniel's voice was rough with emotion. Nicole, you're it for me. There's no one else. There hasn't been anyone else since the moment you handed me that note and changed my entire world. I told you I wasn't giving up on us, and I meant it, so please, tell me we're done waiting. Nicole couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She'd spent 18 months building her career, proving her worth, becoming the woman she needed to be. And now Daniel was sitting across from her in the same café where their story began, wearing the same disguise, drinking the same black coffee, and looking at her with the same intensity that had stolen her breath that very first day. I love you, Nicole finally managed. I never stopped. Every achievement, every success, every late night studying, it was all so I could come back to you as an equal, so I could stand beside you without doubt or shame or fear that I didn't deserve to be there. You always deserved to be there, Daniel said fiercely, but I understand why you needed to prove it to yourself. So where does that leave us? Nicole took a deep breath, feeling the truth settle into her bones. It leaves us here, where we started. But this time, I'm not a scared waitress, and you're not a disguised billionaire. We're two people who've earned the right to be together without apology. Daniel's smile was brilliant and brief before he slid out of his side of the booth and moved to hers, finally closing the distance between them. His hands framed her face with the same tenderness she remembered, and when he kissed her, Nicole felt 18 months of longing and loneliness dissolve into fierce joy. I missed you, Daniel whispered against her lips, every single day. I missed you too. Nicole's hands clutched his shirt, holding him close. But I think we needed this time. I needed to become someone I could be proud of. I was always proud of you, Daniel said, but I'm glad you're proud of yourself now. You've earned that confidence, Nicole. You've built something remarkable. They sat like that for a while, holding each other in the same cafe where their story had begun, and Nicole marveled at how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. The cafe still smelled like coffee and possibility. Daniel still looked at her like she was extraordinary, and Nicole still felt that flutter of butterflies in her stomach when he touched her. But now she also felt something else. Certainty. Certainty in her own worth, in her own capabilities, in her right to take up space in Daniel's world. She'd built her career on her own merit. She'd earned the respect of colleagues and board members. She'd proven to herself and everyone else that she was more than just a lucky waitress who'd caught a billionaire's eye. I have something for you, Daniel said, pulling back slightly. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, and Nicole's heart stopped. Daniel, I'm not proposing, he said quickly, though his eyes held a promise of future possibilities. Not yet. You just finished building your career, and I'm not going to rush you into anything else. but I bought this 18 months ago, the day after you left my penthouse. I've been carrying it with me ever since as a reminder that some things are worth waiting for." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant, a tiny café cup with steam rising from it, rendered in exquisite detail. "It's where our story started," Daniel said softly. "Where a brave woman slipped me a note that changed both our lives. I want you to have it, not as a promise of what comes next, but as a reminder of how far we've both come." Nicole's vision blurred with tears as Daniel fastened the necklace around her throat. The pendant settled right above her heart, warm from his hands, and Nicole knew she'd treasure it forever. "Thank you," she whispered, "for waiting, for believing in me, for giving me the space to find myself. Thank you for being brave enough to take that space, even though it was hard." Daniel kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "So what happens now?" Nicole smiled, feeling lighter than she had in 18 months. "Now we date, properly, publicly, without hiding or shame. We build our relationship alongside our careers. We figure out how to balance love and ambition without sacrificing either one. And when people question whether you earned your position," Daniel asked, "I let my work speak for itself." Nicole's voice was steady with hard-won confidence. "I've built a track record now. I have a degree, a promotion based on merit, and quarterly results that prove my worth. If people want to question that, it says more about them than it does about me." "That's my girl," Daniel said proudly. "Strong, brilliant, and done apologizing for being extraordinary." They left the cafe hand in hand, stepping out into the Seattle afternoon sunlight. A few passers-by recognized them and pulled out phones to take pictures, but Nicole didn't flinch. Let them photograph. Let them gossip. She knew her own worth now, and no amount of outside opinion could diminish what she'd built. "Where to?" Daniel asked, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Nicole thought about all the places they could go. Fancy restaurants, his penthouse, corporate events where they'd have to perform their relationship for an audience. But there was only one place she wanted to be right now. "Your place," Nicole said. "Just us, no outside world, no performances. We've been apart for 18 months. I want to remember what it feels like to just be Nicole and Daniel, without all the complications." Daniel's smile was warm and promising. "That sounds perfect." They walked to his car together, no longer hiding, no longer ashamed. Two people who'd fought for their love and their careers and had emerged stronger for the struggle. Nicole wore her new necklace and her hard-earned confidence. Daniel wore his heart in his eyes and his relief like a second skin. As they drove through Seattle toward Daniel's penthouse, Nicole thought about that scared waitress who'd slipped a note to a disguised billionaire 18 months ago. That woman had been brave, but she hadn't known her own worth. She'd needed validation from others to feel valuable. The woman sitting in this car now was different. She'd built her career through competence and determination. She'd earned respect through results. She'd proven to herself that she belonged in this world, regardless of who she loved. And loving Daniel Crawford, being loved by him, was no longer something to apologize for or hide. It was simply one part of a rich, complex life that Nicole had built with her own two hands. When they reached Daniel's penthouse, he pulled her into his arms the moment the elevator doors closed, kissing her with 18 months of pent-up longing. Nicole kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressed against his like she could make up for all the lost time in a single embrace. The elevator dinged at his floor, and they stumbled out, still kissing, laughing between breathless embraces as Daniel fumbled with his keys. When the door finally opened, they fell through together, and Daniel kicked it shut behind them.